Even the last naturally occurring case of smallpox was someone in Somalia. Then May 8, 1980, WHO officially declared smallpox eradicated worldwide. Now, even with the success that Jenner had, when the UK made smallpox vaccination compulsory in 1853, now, initially, Jenner had opposition because there were people who were making that variolation, people who were profiting from the variolation method, people who specialize in, were really into promoting variolation, where you expose somebody to smallpox. And now you have vaccination, where you expose the person to a smaller, to a milder strain of disease so that the person can develop immunity against a worse strain. So there were people who were benefiting from variolation and they were against vaccination. Some of them said, in variolation is you are exposing smallpox from one person to another person. But in vaccination, you are collecting the vaccine from an animal, which is a cow. Then you also have horsepox. You are collecting from cows and introducing it into humans. So the opponents were now making joke that if you take the vaccine, which is from a cow, you will turn to a cow. That your arm will not turn to a cow, which isn't true. But they drew cartoons and campaigns, So from the beginning of vaccination, there was opposition. There was opposition from people who were benefiting from the old way and who didn't want something new. There was opposition from people who wanted the status quo to remain. There were people who didn't really understand this new thing called vaccination and who were opposed to it. People who felt that you're exposing somebody to animals, animal tissue, and that could be a problem, Then there were those who felt that the smallpox was a disease from God. It was God's will for people to die from smallpox. There is a population control, and that making a vaccine is like interfering with the work of God. So there are those religious objectors. Then there are safety fears of inserting animal materials into humans, as I've talked about. Mistrust of the innovation because it was new. The rivalry from people who were benefiting from variolation and all of that. So initially, there was opposition to the vaccination. So opposition to vaccines have a long history. Those who are opposed to vaccines are called anti-vaxxers. So I now have the anti-vaxxer movement opposed to vaccine. But what made it worse was in 1853, when the UK made vaccination compulsory. When they made it compulsory that everybody must be vaccinated in order to prevent against smallpox, then the opponents of vaccination were upset by it. And they said that this was against freedom. So they now they became organized. Initially, it was a disorganized group of opponents against vaccination. But when government made the Vaccination Act of 1853 in the UK, which made vaccination compulsory under British law, these anti-vaxxers now organized to form the Anti-Vaccination League, Anti-Compulsory Vaccination League, And they said that this is about individual liberties. You can't force people to take something. And this is vaccination, you are giving it to a healthy person. not a sick person. Though vaccination has improved over the centuries, over the years, you are giving it to a healthy person. So there was the argument, if somebody who is not sick, why will you give the person any form of treatment? There are concerns about vaccine safety and other concerns that they raised. Then they didn't trust the government. We don't have trust for government. There's trust deficit. Then there was also trust deficit. They didn't trust the government. So when the government made it compulsory, they were opposed to it. And they didn't trust the pharmaceutical companies that were making the vaccines. There was skepticism that these people are making it for money. Then apart from smallpox vaccine, other vaccines now came up for polio and for other diseases. And as vaccination was coming up, the resistance was growing, and then there was rise of misinformation. There was someone who said he did a research and vaccines was linked to autism. The scientific community has disproven that and found that his research was wrong, but that impression has already gone. And even now in the US, you see people like, the current head of Health and Human Services in the US, who is more of an anti-vaxxer. So it's shocking for somebody who is an anti-vaxxer to be in charge of the healthcare system in the US. So there's globalized misinformation via social media. There's politics involved in vaccine, like it happened with COVID-19 vaccine. So we see that there was variolation, which was even done in Africa before the slave trade. So imagine there was no slave trade. Imagine the kind of technology that would have developed. Then came Edward Jenner, who when he was young, when he was an apprentice to become a surgeon, learned about milkmaids who were exposed to cowpox and he protected them from having the human smallpox. Then he put it to test. In 1756, he put it to test, and when it was successful, he published a book in 1796, he put it to test. 1798, he published the book, and we see that the movement against vaccination started from the beginning of vaccination. That is why you're not surprised today that the anti-vaxxer movement is still strong against vaccines. The irony of it is that people complain about vaccination for, like in our environment, vaccination for adults, like COVID vaccine, but they forget that vaccination is also being given to children for polio, diphtheria, and other common vaccine preventable diseases. So vaccination has a long history, and from the beginning there was opposition to it for people who had personal reasons to be against it and other things that happened. Jenner gained a lot from his apprenticeship, which was medicine by observation. By apprenticeship, you get attached to someone to study, to learn medicine. Later, the physicians, the surgery, everything meshed together in the university, and now you go to medical school to study. You have an MBBS, Bachelor in Medicine and Bachelor in Surgery. Before it was separate, it was just medicine, and then you have to learn surgery by apprenticeship. And now you have other forms of training, mentorship, and other things that. So we have a lot to learn from the history of variolation, vaccination, anti-vaxxer movement, and all that.